Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Aisha Subarkash. America's foes and even some friends have called for changes in how the world does business. Long dominating international trade, the US dollar also gave America unrivaled power to spend, lend and punish countries unilaterally by shutting them out of the global financial system. But that could be about to change. Countries like China, Russia and others across the Middle East, Latin America and the Indo Pacific are calling for less reliance on the US dollar. But when did it start and what hurdles has the US greenback faced over the decades?
Directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets.
Today, Brazil, in our hemisphere, largest country in the Western Hemisphere south of us, cut a trade deal with China. They're going to, from now on, do trade in their own currencies, get right around the dollar.
And to further discuss the increasing global trend of de-dollarization, joining me now from Petaling Jaya, Malaysia, is Geoffrey Williams. He's head of research and innovation at the Malaysia University of Science and Technology. And from St. Gallen, Switzerland, Guido Cozzi. He is a professor of macroeconomics at the University of St. Gallen. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. So we just heard in our report that multiple countries and leaders are calling for reducing reliance on the dollar. And now Brazil's president, who is in China, just said about this, the dollar and its role. Let's have a listen and then we'll start talking.
Every night, I ask myself why all countries are forced to do their trade backed by the dollar. Why can't we do our trade backed by our currency? Why are we not committed to innovating?
So, Geoffrey, what do you make of his comments in Beijing? Is the de-dollarization push becoming a reality?
Well, first, thanks for having me. This isn't the first time, of course, that this issue of de-dollarization has been on the agenda. We've been discussing it for many decades. But there is a difference, I think, now in the current discussion. The first is that there is a very significant shift in global trade and global investment, and also the global economic balance of power. That's the first thing. Second, we do have some very troubling international developments around the world, which are causing people to rethink about the overall global economic and political system. And I think the third reason is that very many people are actually discussing it and discussing the possibilities and learning from the discussions we've had in the past about what are the possibilities for de-dollarization. So this time around, I think it is a little bit more serious than we've had in the past. But nonetheless, there are still challenges to this. overall process.
So Guido, earlier this year, Brazil and China, which are both part of the BRICS group, agreed to settle trade in their own currencies instead of the dollar. So how significant is that, given that Brazil is a major exporter of raw materials that are usually priced in dollars?
Well, this is significant, and in a way, it is inevitable. It will keep going and becoming more important in the future. If we take, for example, the OECD forecast on the Chinese GDP in a quarter century, the GDP of China will become 60% higher than that of the United States. So, and it will match the combined GDPs of Europe and the United States. So we will see more and more of the use of the yuan, but this will take long. For the moment, we can have bilateral trades in their own currencies, but the dollar remains the strongest currency.
So, Geoffrey, last week, the French president, Emmanuel Macron, was also in China, and his visit caused a lot of backlash from the West, especially from the United States. What do you make of this visit, and what does he want to achieve?
Well, I think that China is becoming an increasingly important trade partner to many countries around the world, and of course that also has implications in terms of trade with Europe. France is one of Europe's largest trading economies and relies very heavily on trade. So I think the meeting between France and China is part of that entente, if you like. That's part of that process of making sure that trade and investment can be done in a cordial way. And as has just been mentioned, it is likely that that trade and investment process will increase because the Chinese economy is one of the largest economies already and will continue to grow.
So, Guido, is the French president trying to fulfill his idea of an autonomous Europe away from the United States, and how would that impact the two-country relations moving forward?
Well, away from the United States is too much. I mean, we are close allies, so I don't think this will happen. But it's true that the combined West will take a diversified approach. So it will keep trade going and potentially peaceful international relationship alive.
But do you believe that his remarks about the European sovereignty expose divisions within the bloc? I mean, why do you think the United States is so furious about his remarks?
Well, clearly, yes. I mean, clearly, there is a little bit of that also because the United States needs Europe. As I said before, in 25 years, the difference between China's GDP and that of the United States will exactly be equal to the GDP of Europe. So Europe is the natural ally, and the combined West shall always remain united. That said, difference in nuances, in styles are welcome, but we cannot fragment the West.
So, Geoffrey, how has latest remarks added to China's expanding power, both in the Indo Pacific, which the US has been shoring up alliances against Beijing?
I think that it's simply a reflection of the reality of the trade and investment flows. The Belt and Road Initiative has been an extremely important component of China's trade policy and investment policy, and also its global diplomatic policy. And it is including many dozens and dozens of countries in a way that we haven't seen in the past. And for Asia, of course, China is the pivotal market, both for imports and exports, as well as for trade and investment opportunities both ways, investment into China and also Chinese investment into all of the countries around ASEAN and the wider Asia community. So it is natural, I think, because of the size of China, that it will take on this pivotal role. And that's, as was mentioned, is a part of a long-term trend, and it's not going to happen overnight, but it's also unlikely to slow down.
So, Guido, 2 weeks ago, Russian President Vladimir Putin also expressed readiness to use China's yuan in its foreign trade. How is that going to play out?
Well, clearly, he needs some support. So it's a desperate move. On the other hand, the yuan is strong, and it showed its strength in the inflation case, because unlike the United States, it managed to have monetary and fiscal discipline such that at the moment, China is the inflation champion of the world. Whereas in the United States, they pumped too much money and fiscal discipline was not followed. So this de-dollarization cases may be a warning for the United States to restore more fiscal balance and more monetary discipline. But anyway, these Chinese advantages at the moment with Russia is simply a geopolitical situation that may change any moment.
So, Geoffrey, what's your take on that? I mean, how would both sides here, Russia and China, benefit from this new arrangement, as well as their allies in Asia, Africa, Latin America, even the Middle East?
Well, I think in the face of the sanctions that Russia is currently dealing with, they are looking for new markets, particularly, of course, for oil and gas. And China and India are both ready markets for Russian exports of oil and gas. And that's very important for Russia. But it's also an opportunity for these trades to be done in a currency that isn't the dollar. One of the main reasons why the dollar has this dominance is because many of the major commodities, of course, oil and gas, but also all types of metals and food type commodities, including grains and so on, are all done and traded in dollars. That switch between Russia and China is a consequence of the current geopolitical situation, but it could have long-term economic implications if that trade in terms of oil and gas from Russia continues to be done in bilateral currencies rather than dollars.
As you've mentioned the economic implications, Geoffrey, how would that impact Western sanctioned financial and banking structures and the markets of both countries? I mean, could this help Russia and China to move to exclude its main banks from global markets?
I'm not sure that it would be to China's advantage to exclude its banks or its financial institutions from global financial markets. Actually, I think it's probably the other way around, that they want more access to global financial markets and global banking opportunities and global lending more generally. But it certainly does give them more of those opportunities, and it does help to demonstrate the capacity of the Chinese financial system, the Chinese financial companies, to take their role and take their place. Historically, they have played a rather minor role, but now, of course, they're increasing both in terms of their size, in terms of the type of operations that they're involved in, in terms of lending, corporate banking, and as well as commercial banking as well.
So, Guido, trading in Yuan, I mean, how would that affect the Middle Eastern countries, which are also doing businesses with both Russia and China? Because we know that the United Arab Emirates is selling China its gas in Yuan through a French company.
Yes, I mean, it's part of the long-term trend of diversification of currencies that reflects the weight of China increasing. So this is natural, and of course, this will also happen along the Belt and Road. It is important that this doesn't take an antagonist form, because, for example, in the Middle East, their security linked to the United States cannot be replaced with China. However, it is important to oil markets and trade so that more diversified portfolios will be used.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.